What if it's not just bad luck? What if your life isn't repeating by accident? What if your pain, the same heartbreaks, the same self-doubt, the same mistakes, is trying to teach you something? You meet different people, but the wounds feel the same. You try to move on, but somehow the same story keeps finding you. You call it bad luck, fate, maybe even your personality. But what if it's none of those things? What if the patterns you hate the most are the parts of you crying out to be understood? In this video, we're going to explore the psychology, the ancient wisdom, and the spiritual truth behind why we keep reliving the same painful loops. And how to break them, not by force, but by finally understanding what they came to reveal. Because the moment you stop running and start listening is the moment everything begins to change. Let's begin. Life is trying to get your attention. Life whispers before it shouts. At first, it sends subtle signs, a gut feeling, a moment of hesitation, a quiet discomfort. But when we ignore those signals, the whispers become patterns, and the patterns become pain. Why do we keep attracting the same toxic relationships? Why do we self-sabotage just when things start going well? Why do we keep ending up in the same emotional place even when the circumstances change? Psychologists call this repetition compulsion, an unconscious drive to recreate familiar emotional experiences, even painful ones, because they feel safe. Not good, not right, but familiar. This is the brain's tragic brilliance. What we cannot understand, we try to reenact again and again, hoping for a different ending. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." We don't repeat patterns because we're flawed. We repeat them because we're trying to resolve something unhealed, something unfinished. Ancient wisdom mirrors this idea. In Buddhism, samsara is the cycle of suffering, born from ignorance and attachment. The way out isn't to escape, but to awaken. Every painful pattern is a mirror. It doesn't ask for shame, it asks for awareness. So if you keep ending up in the same place, ask, what is life trying to show me that I'm not yet ready to see? Because when the lesson is heard, the pattern no longer needs to repeat. The emotional blueprint you didn't know you had. Long before we knew who we were learning how to survive. As children, we absorb emotional lessons not through words, but through experience. We watch how love is given or withheld. We learn whether our emotions are welcome or inconvenient. We observe what earns praise and what triggers rejection. These early dynamics form what psychologists call core emotional schemas, inner blueprints that shape how we relate to others and ourselves. So what happens when love is conditional? When safety is unpredictable? When we're taught directly or indirectly that our worth must be earned? We grow up seeking familiarity, even if it hurts. You may find yourself drawn to emotionally unavailable people. You may unconsciously recreate rejection, sabotage intimacy, or abandon your dreams just before they bloom. Not because you want to fail, but because success feels foreign. Love feels dangerous. Wholeness feels undeserved. This isn't madness. It's memory. The body and brain replaying what they know. Stoic philosophy Epictetus taught, men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them. Change the view and you change the life. Modern neuroscience agrees. Our brains are plastic. New patterns can be created, but only when the old ones are made conscious. You didn't choose the blueprint, but you can choose to revise it. And the first step is noticing the pattern not as a punishment, but as a map. Trauma doesn't just hurt, it rewires. Every unresolved pain leaves an imprint, not just in the mind, but in the body, the nervous system, and the subconscious. When something traumatic happens, whether it's neglect, betrayal, abandonment, or even chronic invalidation, your system adapts for survival. The nervous system becomes hypervigilant. Your brain's alarm center, the amygdala, becomes overactive, and your sense of identity wraps itself around the pain. You start believing things like, I'm not lovable, I always mess things up, good things don't last for me. And so when life offers peace, love, or success, it feels unfamiliar, unsafe. You brace for it to disappear, so you push it away, you retreat, or you sabotage it. Not out of failure, but out of protection. This is why the past keeps showing up in the present. Not because you're cursed, but because your body is still living in yesterday. In spiritual traditions, this is known as karma. Not punishment, but the inertia of unhealed action. Patterns replay until consciousness interrupts them. Trauma expert Dr. Peter Levine said, "Trauma is not what happens to us, but what we hold inside in the absence of an empathetic witness. To break the pattern, we must become that witness. To our own wounds, to our own stories, to the moments that shaped us and no longer serve us. Because healing isn't forgetting the past. It's learning how to live so fully in the present that the past finally lets go. Awareness is the first break in the cycle. Most people try to fix the pattern at the surface. They switch jobs, leave relationships, move cities, but the same feelings follow. Why? Because the pattern isn't out there. It lives in perception, in reaction. In the invisible story you keep telling yourself about who you are and what you deserve. Here's the shift. You cannot change what you're not aware of. When you become the observer of your pattern, not the victim of it, you unlock the first doorway to freedom. That moment when you say, wait, I've felt this before. Why am I drawn to this again? What am I believing that's pulling me into this loop? That moment is everything. It turns autopilot into agency, reaction into reflection. In Stoicism, Marcus Aurelius wrote, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. This is not denial, it's reclamation. With awareness, the pattern loses its grip. You pause before the text. You sit with the discomfort. You stop chasing what hurts you because now you see it. And in that seeing, a crack forms. Through that crack, light enters. And what once ruled you from the shadows now begins to lose its power in the light of truth. Healing isn't linear, it's layered. Here's the hard truth that most self-help books won't tell you. You don't heal a pattern once and for all. You heal in layers. You heal in spirals. You'll think you're past it, and then life will hand you a deeper layer. A familiar trigger. A new version of the same test. And if you don't understand this, you'll think you're failing. But you're not. You're evolving. Just like peeling an onion, each layer brings tears, but also clarity. Because each return to the pattern isn't a relapse. It's an opportunity to respond differently, to choose differently, to meet an old wound with a new self. In Eastern philosophy, this is known as the spiral path, where growth doesn't follow a straight line, but a deepening circle. The same lesson revisits you, not to punish you, but to reveal your progress. Even neuroscience confirms this truth. Each time you override a patterned reaction, each time you pause instead of panic, respond instead of repeat, you are literally rewiring your brain. The grooves of your past don't disappear overnight, but with compassion, awareness, and consistent choice, they soften, they change. And so do you. So don't give up because the pattern resurfaced. Celebrate it, because now you see it, and seeing is the first step to breaking it. The power of conscious repatterning. Once you recognize your patterns, you begin to reclaim your power. But recognition is only the beginning. The next step is conscious repatterning, replacing the old loop with something truer, kinder, and more aligned with the life you want to live. This is where intention meets discipline. Because the brain doesn't just forget what it's practiced for years, it has to be shown a new way, again and again, until that becomes the path of the least resistance. Start with your internal dialogue. Notice the voice that says, "This always happens to me." Interrupt it with, "This time I choose differently." Replace avoidance with awareness, numbing with presence, reaction with reflection. In spiritual terms, this is the essence of transformation. Not just transcending your pain, but alchemizing it. In ancient alchemy, the goal wasn't to turn metal into gold. It was to turn suffering into wisdom, shadow into light, habit into awakening. This is where the Stoics were precise. "We suffer more in imagination than in reality," Seneca said. Which means the path forward begins in how we think, what we expect, and what we practice. Modern psychology now calls this neuroplasticity, the ability of your brain to grow in new pathways, well, to learn, unlearn, and relearn at any stage of life. So you're not doomed to relive the past. You're being called to rewire your future. Not with perfection, but with intention. Not by force, but by consistent, compassionate awareness. And that is how the cycle ends. From loops to liberation, at the heart of every pattern is a part of you that once needed protecting. A scared child, a bruised belief, a memory too heavy to carry in the open. So you buried it, and without knowing it, you built your life around it. Not because you're broken, but because you were brilliant at surviving. But survival is not the same as living. And repeating a pattern is not failure, it's a sacred opportunity to rewrite the ending. The invitation is not to fight your old self. It's to integrate them, to become the one who holds space for your younger parts, not the one controlled by them. In many indigenous traditions, healing is communal. Patterns are not private shame, they are ancestral echoes. To heal yourself is to heal backwards and forwards in time. And so when you break a pattern, when you stop running, when you choose differently, you're not just healing you, you're healing generations. You become the bridge, the one who ends cycles of fear, abandonment, and unworthiness. Not with rage, but with presence. In that way, healing is not just personal, it's revolutionary. So if you've been repeating pain, don't ask, "What's wrong with me?" Ask, "What truth have I not yet heard?" Because when you finally listen, the story begins to change. Not with drama, but with quiet, holy courage. The pattern ends with you. If this message found you, it's because you're ready. Ready to stop living life on loop. Ready to stop confusing familiarity with destiny. Ready to step out of the story that was written for survival and begin writing one rooted in truth. Your patterns are not your punishment. They're your signal. And the moment you bring awareness to them, without judgment, without shame, you begin to dissolve their power. The path forward is not about fixing yourself. It's about finally seeing yourself. With tenderness, with honesty, with compassion. You are not broken. You are patterned. And patterns can change. So take a breath. Feel that? That's possibility. The quiet space between reaction and choice. And in that space, your healing begins. If this video resonated with you, take a moment now. Like this video that tells the algorithm this message matters. Leave a comment. What patterns are you ready to break? Subscribe to LuminousSoul for more soul-awakening content rooted in ancient wisdom, modern science, and timeless truth. And if someone you love is caught in a cycle they don't yet understand, share this video. You never know what one act of kindness can unlock. This is your sign, not to fight the old, but to rise in the new. You are not alone. The pattern ends with you,